Mark chapter 14 this morning. We're really glad you guys are with us. We've been going through the book of Mark, and I just love the story of Jesus, don't you? Amen. One thing I love about it this time of year is that it's a historical story, and it's not some fable in a far-off land, but this was real history that happened on a date and time. From the birth of Jesus to the death of Jesus, the resurrection of Jesus, these happened in human history. And it really is the capstone in all of human history. It makes everything make sense. And as we look at this last week in Jesus' life, before Resurrection Sunday, we're going to look at some dark times, but with some beautifully powerful meaning behind it. Next week, David is going to be preaching on Resurrection Sunday. We're going to be at the youth conference, so we'll be celebrating there. But I pray that you'll come and support him and encourage him as he brings the word, and I thank him for being willing to do that. And this morning, as we kind of reflect on that last week of Jesus' life, I just recently heard about a man who's a friend of ours that was given 3 months to live. And I always wondered, if that would be a blessing or if that would just be really hard, right? To know exactly when and exactly how you're going to die. I wonder if that would be a source of anxiety. But Jesus knew exactly when and exactly how he was going to die. In fact, he traveled to Jerusalem for the purpose of being killed, for the purpose of dying for us. And so, you look at, a lot of people call this Palm Sunday, and it reflects on what's called the triumphal entry, where Jesus comes into Jerusalem and everyone's crying Hosanna, waving palm branches, everyone's excited. And what a lot of people overlook is the fact that as Jesus came into Jerusalem, he looks out over the city, and what does he do? He doesn't bask in the glory. He bawls like a baby. He weeps. He's blubbering. And he says, "Oh, Jerusalem, if you had only known the things that make for peace." And he knows that in just a few days, their cries of Hosanna are going to turn into cries of crucify him. And yet he came anyway, meek, lowly, and riding on a donkey. We're going to look at what's often called the institution of the Lord's Supper this morning. It was actually Jesus taking the Passover and giving it the meaning, revealing the meaning that it had all along. But first I want to look at a few last meals in history. When prisoners are going to be executed, a lot of times they'll be given opportunity to request anything for their last meal. There's a guy named John Wayne Gacy, convicted of serial murder, deaths of over 33 people, but he asked for a bucket of KFC chicken, 12 fried prawns. Those are shrimp for you rednecks out there. I'm kidding. I had to look it up, that's why. Thought you might want to. I didn't know what a prawn was. You go down to the prawn shop and sell your stuff, A pound of strawberries, french fries, and a Diet Coke. So after all that, make sure the Coke is Diet, because I'm about to die, and I don't want to put on too much weight, so make it a Diet Coke. Ted Bundy murdered 30 people. He was offered a last meal. He declined it. He was given the traditional steak, cooked medium rare, eggs over easy, hash browns, toast milk, coffee, juice, butter, and jelly, but he did not eat any of it. Someone named Dovey Gillis Williams was given final meal. His request was 12 chocolate bars and some ice cream. A guy named Charles Walker ate fried wild rabbit, biscuits, and blackberry pie. Timothy McVeigh, who you probably know of, convicted of domestic terrorism, he asked for 2 pints of mint chocolate chip ice cream. A guy named Danny Rowling was offered, he asked for lobster tail, butterfly shrimp, not prawns, baked potato, strawberry cheesecake, and sweet tea. Anyway, it could go on and on. There have been lots of last meals, and sometimes it's just interesting. I've read of one guy who asked for 1 olive, and he didn't eat it. And sometimes it shows you that these people are actually maybe have a little bit of remorse when they refuse the last meal. And then others are just like, ask for the entire world on their plate. But Jesus' last meal, what was that like? Jesus' last meal. Let's look at it. Mark chapter 14. It says, on the first day of unleavened bread, when they sacrificed the Passover lamb, Jesus' disciples said to him, where will you have us go and prepare for you to eat the Passover? And he sent 2 of his disciples and said to them, go to the city, and a man carrying a jar of water will meet you, and follow him wherever he enters. Say to the master of the house, the teacher says, where is my guest room, where I may eat the Passover with my disciples? And he will show you a large upper room, furnished and ready. There prepare for us. And the disciples set out and went into the city and found it just as he had told them, and they prepared the Passover. On Airbnb, you can rate your host, I guess, and you can choose whether or not the accommodation actually fit the listing. Was it represented well in the pictures? Did you know what you were getting into? Because let's face it, sometimes you might go somewhere and you thought you were going to a nice Airbnb, good deal for the price, and you realize like there's a train next door, or you're like, where's my luggage? Oh, mice took it. And it's like, but Jesus knew exactly. I'm like, you just go in the city, and the first guy, he had it planned out perfectly. And this is just representative of how much he knew, all the details he knew around his death. Right? Now, what is this Passover? We have read through the book of Exodus. We studied that together where, because God is a God of justice, and the Egyptians had enslaved the Jews for so many hundreds of years. God was going to execute justice, and yet God wasn't a respecter of persons. He said for the Jewish people to take a lamb, to sacrifice this lamb, to put the blood on the doorpost, to eat this lamb, along with the bread and the cup and bitter herbs. And this was a festival that the Jews had kept for centuries, for millennia, to remember that they were enslaved, that God made a way for them to be free again. And God didn't just say to the Jews, don't worry about the lamb, I'm just going to execute justice on the Egyptians. No, everyone was going to get justice if it were not for this lamb. Notice that? God was not, in God's eyes, the Jews weren't any better, morally speaking, any better in and of themselves than the Egyptians, but rather they were recipients of His grace, and they were given a way for the lamb to be the substitute. It says that when it was evening, Jesus came with the 12. And as they were reclining at table and eating, Jesus said, truly I say to you, one of you will betray me, one who is eating with me. Now this shows just how intimate of a setting this was, because sometimes we sit at a table and everything's at 90-degree angles, right? We're sitting there and our elbows are at 90 degrees, our hips, our knees, we're at 90 degree angles, and we can ask someone, would you pass the Grey Poupon, right? You can eat with someone in that fashion without really being that close to them. But it says that they were reclining at a table, because they didn't have 90-degree chairs. They laid down on their side, everyone around the circle, and it was much more intimate setting, because they were on their side on the floor. They were closer to one another. And this is especially poignant because one of them at the table is the betrayer. One of them has been planning and plotting. We read last week in the beginning of chapter 14 how Judas despised this woman for taking this priceless alabaster flask of nard and breaking it open and pouring it all on Jesus. It was worth what would be today tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And she just broke it, and in Judas' mind just wasted it on Jesus. It could have been sold, it could have been auctioned off. And we read about how Judas was the treasurer. And he was dipping into Jesus, he was embezzling from Jesus, dipping into Jesus' money bag. And so he was especially indignant that he didn't have a chance to get his claws on this precious family heirloom. And it shows you right then and there the difference between this woman, who the Gospel of John tells us was Mary, and she also wiped Jesus' hair with her feet and her tears. The difference between her and Judas. Because Judas just followed Jesus to get what he could get from Jesus. I'll follow Jesus as long as I get something from Jesus. Mary followed Jesus to get Jesus. And so for her, this wasn't a waste. For her, he was the meaning of it all. For her, there was no better way, no more honorable way for this precious family heirloom to be used than to prepare Jesus for what turned out to be his burial. So think about that, because we all have a little bit of Jesus in us, don't we? What can I get from God? What can I get from Jesus? Mary just wanted Jesus. At church we attended long ago, there was a woman who was pretty influential in the church body, and something needed to be done. She was right there doing it. A lot of people looked up to her, but she said, I don't want this world to stop. I don't really want to go to heaven. I just want to be here, be with my family, and it just broke my heart. Because you almost wonder, I know we all have our moments of weakness and times where our faith kind of wanes, but like, what about God? Don't you want to see him? Don't you want to be with him forever? What is so special about this world that it's better than the promise of being with Jesus for eternity? And so for Mary, she wanted Jesus. For Judas, he wanted something from Jesus. And he was willing to leverage his relationship, his insider information, to get 30 pieces of silver, which we said last week was the cheapest price you could pay for a slave. And here Jesus is reclining at the table with Judas, the betrayer himself. And again, we might eat a business meal with someone you cannot trust this person at all. You're trying to make a business deal and all the whining and dining scene and all that. In this day and age, you did not eat with someone that you were not willing to go all in with. This was a very intimate, very trusting relationship. And so when Jesus says, truly, one of you will betray me, the one who is eating with me, it really hits. The one who is eating with me. And they begin to be sorrowful and say to him, one after another, is it I? It kind of breaks your heart too, right? On one hand, maybe humility. But on the other hand, I think each disciple knew in his heart, I really can't be counted on. I'm feeble, I'm frail, and fickle is it me? Jesus said to them, it's one of the 12, one who's dipping bread into the dish with me. For the Son of Man goes as is written of him. But woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been better for that man if he had not been born. This is graphic. I was going to debate about whether or not to say it last week. But Mary breaks open this alabaster jar and spills it. Jesus on the cross pours out his blood. Judas will receive these 30 pieces of silver. He'll throw it, he'll spill it into the temple. He will reject it. He will hang himself in a field, eventually decompose, and his body will spill. His entrails will spill. Mary poured out her best. Jesus poured out his best. Judas was poured out. But Jesus says, woe to the man who betrays the Son of Man. Now, why isn't Jesus saying, Judas, I know it's you. I know what you do. But at the same time, he lets Judas know, I know. A lot of scholars think this was Jesus' last act of mercy. Not throwing Judas under the bus, not humiliating, but giving him a chance. I know what you're planning. I'm not going to call you out on it. I'm not going to harden your heart in that way, but I'm going to give you one more chance. But Judas didn't take it. Later we're going to read about Jesus foretelling Peter's denial. A lot of times we separate people, right? There's a line, there's good, and there's evil. These are the good people, and these are the evil people. And there's a line there, and you're either on this side or that side. But it's been said that the line that divides good and evil doesn't divide one person from another. That line goes right through the middle of every human heart. Think about that. Even Peter was going to fail Jesus. It says, as they were eating, he took bread, and after blessing it, broke it and gave it to them and said, take, this is my body. So in the Passover meal, the host would take the different elements and they would explain the reasoning for this is why we take unleavened bread. We had to hurry out of Egypt. This is why we're eating bitter herbs. It's to remember the 4 centuries of bitter slavery in Egypt. This is why we eat this roasted lamb. It's to commemorate the sacrifice and the blood that was put on the door to save us from the death of the firstborn. But as Jesus takes the bread, he doesn't explain what happened in Egypt. He explains that what happened in Egypt really points toward him. This is my body. Notice how he doesn't say this represents my body. He says, take this is my body. So there's some churches that teach that when we take the Lord's Supper, we are re-crucifying Jesus over again. We're putting him on an altar and re-sacrificing him. That's not what Jesus is saying. He died once for all sin. But when he says this is my body, he's saying it's bread, but in a spiritual sense, it's my body. Can something be 2 things at once? Absolutely. Absolutely. Can it be bread? Yes. Can it be his body? Yes. Because there's a physical side and a spiritual side. He took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, and they drank of it. And he said to them, "This is my blood of..." Wait, pause. He took a cup. He gave thanks. And then he said, "This is my blood of the covenant." I want you guys to see the tension here. Because Jesus had said, "I earnestly desire to eat this with you." And yet he's saying, this is my body, this is my blood of my covenant. He knows what this means. The suffering it represents, but at the same time, he has been looking forward to this moment. Even though the betrayer is at the table, even though everyone around him in the circle is going to flee and run and deny and curse his name. This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for me. Truly I say to you, I will not drink again of the fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it new in the kingdom of God. So what they used to do is when they really wanted to commit to something, they would say, "I will not eat or drink until I get X, Y, or Z done." Right? There are people in the Bible that say, "I will not eat or drink until we see this man executed for the crimes he's committed." And it was usually an inferior person making that promise to a superior. But then when you look back, when God makes a covenant with Abraham, there's a dead animal that's there, and God makes a covenant with Abraham. God is saying, "I will keep this covenant even if it kills me." Way back in Abraham's covenant, "I will make this covenant and keep this covenant even if it kills me." And they did. There was an animal, and it was torn into two pieces, and the parties would walk between it, signifying, "Let it be done to me as it is to this animal if I fail on my half of the bargain." God entered into a covenant with Abraham. And when Jesus is saying, "I will not drink again of the fruit of the vine until that day," he's saying, "I'm going to keep this covenant even if it kills me." And I did. And when they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. And Jesus said to them, "You will all fall away. For it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep will be scattered. But after I am raised up, I will go before you to Galilee." Peter then said to him, "Even though they all fall away, I will not." Peter's trying to make that same covenant. Even if it kills me, I will be faithful. And Jesus is thinking, "No, you won't. No, you won't." Do we not get down on ourselves sometimes when we feel, man, I don't have enough faith. I'm not doing enough good. I'm not acting as good as I should. I'm not speaking as well as I should. I mess up. And we get anxious. Can God still love me? Can God still save me? And when we see Peter, "I'll follow you even though I die," Jesus says, you're going to deny me 3 times. Don't depend on the strength of your faith. Depend on the object of your faith. I heard an example. If you're sliding off a cliff and you reach out and grab a branch, how much faith do you have in that branch to save you? Not much. Right? The strength isn't in the quality of your faith in that branch. The strength isn't in the amount of trust you have. The strength is in the branch. Right? You see what I'm saying? The object of our faith is more important than the quality of our faith. So even Peter, when he was falling and had fallen. Jesus says, "You'll deny me 3 times." Jesus is going to restore Peter because it was the object of Peter's faith, not the quality, not the strength. Peter says, emphatically, "If I must die with you, I will not deny you." And they all said the same. But then they went to a place called Gethsemane. And Jesus said to his disciples, "Sit here while I pray." And he took with him Peter, James, and John, and began to be greatly distressed and troubled. If you look at Muhammad, if you look at Confucius, if you look at Buddha, even Moses, they all died in old age, in relative comfort. Jesus died violently at a young age. Unlike any of the other founders of any world religion, and if you look at the way Jesus began to meet death, you read all these examples of Christian martyrs. They're going to be burned at the stake for their faith, and they say, "We will not recant, we will not back down." There's a man named Polycarp who was a disciple of John, the apostle, and he was threatened with wild beasts, and he basically said, "Bring it on." He was threatened with fire, and he said, "The fire lasts for maybe an hour, and then it's extinguished, but what about eternal judgment?" He's trying to convert the people who are threatening him. He says, "Bring it on." Why would Jesus be greatly distressed and troubled? He just said he's going to raise from the dead. Why does he look at the surface level that the Muslims would say, "How can he be God?" when he's so troubled and distressed and he's just melting down and breaking down? God doesn't do that. Even normal mortals have walked into a rain of fiery bullets or literal fire or torture and done so bravely. In verse 34, it says, "My soul is very sorrowful, even unto death." Remain here and watch, and going a little further, he fell on the ground and prayed, if it were possible, the hour might pass from him. What was going on? He was starting to get a taste of that bitter cup of God's judgment and God's wrath. We talked about this morning in Bible class, you cannot have love without anger. It's impossible. If you truly love, you will have true anger. If you love someone and they're hurting themselves, you will be angry about it. You still love them, but there's an anger because you love them. If someone else is hurting them, you're going to be angry. If God was just, if God was love and nothing else, if God was love but didn't execute justice, if there was no judgment for the headless of the world, or some of the serial killers we just read about, the people who worked in Nazi concentration camps, or the killing fields of the Pol Pot regime, if there was no eternal judgment for them, then he would be a God of justice. The atheists don't want God to judge, but then when it looks like he's not, they get all offended and upset and angry. It can't be a God if there's evil in the world. Jesus was beginning to get a taste now. while everyone's asleep. You see that? No one's looking. They're all asleep. He's all alone. You would think maybe God would have him strapped to the cross and then let him start to see what it's going to be. But he gets a taste. No one's looking. All alone. He could have walked away. It says he came and found him sleeping, and he said to Peter, Simon, are you asleep? Do you not watch 1 hour? Watch and pray you may not enter into temptation. The spirit is willing indeed, but the flesh is weak. And again, he went away and prayed the same words, and again found them sleeping. He came a third time. Are you still sleeping? He was all alone. Why would God let him? Why risk it? In the Greek, the language is just, it's so profound how utterly distraught he begins to be here in the garden before the soldiers arrive. What's happening here is that the first Adam, our great-great-great-granddad, he was given a test with a tree. Obey me concerning the tree, and you will live. And here Jesus is given a test. Obey me concerning the tree, and you will be crushed. You will be tortured. You will be destroyed. For Adam, the promise is that obey God concerning the tree, and you will have life. For Jesus, obey God concerning the tree, and you will face the utter darkness. Darkness so we can't comprehend. Polycarp could look at the flames and say maybe an hour. Jesus was looking at the wrath of God, an infinite anger towards sin. We cannot comprehend the suffering that Jesus was waiting to endure. It wasn't just the nails, it wasn't just the whips and the thorns and the insults, the humiliation of being stripped naked and hung on a tree. But it was the fact that when he looked to God for comfort, this time of darkness, he saw the jaws of hell. He saw the bitter cup. And when Jesus obeys God concerning the tree, he passed the test that Adam never could, that you never could, that I never could. And that's what it took. That substitution. It was never about the lamb, the blood on the door. That's never what it was about. It was always about Jesus. We've been enslaved to sin and death by our own choices, our own broken desires, and yet God laid on him the iniquity of us all. But Jesus says it's enough. The hour has come. The Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand. Yeah, this is dark. This is heavy. But I want you to see the whole reason God did this is because of the worth that he sees in you. The glory that he wants to reveal in you, the love he wants to pour into you. Christianity is not about if you can be good enough, if you can get your act together. It's all about what he did for us.